Horror road trip story filled with suspense, thrill, and spookiness. The Endless Mile. Zane had never believed in ghost stories. To him, tales of haunted roads, cursed highways, and vanishing hitchhikers were just that stories made to scare people for a cheap thrill. But as he sat behind the wheel that foggy evening with his 3 friends crammed into the car, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in his gut. They were heading back from a camping trip in the mountains. The sun had already set, and the thin fog that had begun to gather around them was now thick enough to obscure most of the road ahead. The route they had planned to take home was blocked due to a rock slide, forcing them to take a detour along Route 66, a road notorious for accidents and strange occurrences, though none of them openly admitted to knowing the rumors. Ali, sitting in the passenger seat, was fiddling with the radio, but only static greeted him. "Man, this thing's busted," he muttered, slapping it for good measure. Sarah, from the back seat, rolled her eyes. "Leave it. The mountains probably killed the signal." Zane said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the road, and despite the banter in the car, a growing sense of dread gnawed at him. The GPS had stopped working an hour ago, and their cell phones were useless. What bothered him more was that the road seemed to be never-ending. There were no mile markers, no road signs, and they hadn't passed another car in hours. "Does anyone else think this is weird?" Aisha, Ali's sister, asked from the back seat. "It feels like we've been driving forever." Ali laughed, though his tone was strained. "It's just the fog messing with your sense of time. We'll be home soon." But they wouldn't be. Not anytime soon. The car's headlights flickered for a moment, causing Zane to slow down. "Did you guys see that?" he asked, glancing at the dashboard. The engine was running fine, but the lights had definitely dimmed for a second. "Just a glitch," Ali said, though his voice wasn't as confident as before. Zane's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as they drove deeper into the fog. The road stretched ahead, unchanging, with no landmarks or signs of civilization. He hadn't noticed it before, but the trees on either side of the highway were wrong, too tall, too close, and gnarled in unnatural shapes. Their twisted branches reached out toward the road like skeletal hands. "I don't like this," Sarah said, her voice small. "Maybe we should turn back." Zane shook his head. "We've been on this road for hours. Turning back would mean driving in circles. Let's just keep going. We have to reach a town or a gas station eventually." But there was no town. No gas station, only the endless road. They drove in silence for another 30 minutes. The tension in the car grew with each passing mile. Even Ali, the group's jokester, was quiet now, his eyes darting nervously from the road to the fog outside. Then, it happened. A shadow darted across the road, just outside the beam of their headlights. "Did you see that?" Sarah gasped, sitting up straight. Zane slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the road. His heart raced and his breath came in quick gasps. The headlights illuminated the fog ahead, but there was nothing. No shadow, no figure. Just the empty road stretching into oblivion. "What was it?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Zane muttered, his hand still gripping the wheel. "An animal, maybe." Ali shook his head. "That was no animal, bro. It was human-shaped." Sarah whimpered, sinking back into her seat. "Let's just go, please." Zane hesitated for a moment longer, then pressed his foot on the gas. The car slowly rolled forward, but the tension in the air was palpable. No one spoke. A few miles down the road, the shadow appeared again, this time closer. It darted in and out of the fog, always staying just at the edge of their vision. Each time it appeared, it seemed to linger a little longer, its shape becoming clearer. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was something else. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that bent at odd angles. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. "Oh God," Aisha whispered, clutching her brother's arm. "What is that?" Zane's heart pounded in his chest as the figure stepped onto the road, directly in front of the car. He slammed on the brakes again, bringing the car to a jarring halt. The creature stood there, staring at them, its glowing eyes fixed on Zane. For a moment, no one moved. Then the figure took a slow, deliberate step toward the car. Drive, Zayn Ali shouted, panic rising in his voice. Drive now. But Zayn was frozen, his hands shaking on the wheel as the creature approached. It moved with an unnatural grace, its limbs bending and shifting as if it didn't belong to this world. Just as the creature reached the car, Zayn snapped out of his paralysis and floored the gas pedal. The tires screeched as the car lurched forward, barreling past the figure. But as they sped away, the thing didn't disappear into the fog. Instead, it seemed to glide alongside them, keeping pace with the car. "How is it doing that?" Sarah shrieked, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," Zayn shouted, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Just hold on." The road seemed to stretch endlessly before them, and no matter how fast they drove, the creature stayed with them, its glowing eyes never leaving the car. It moved effortlessly, its body twisting and contorting in ways that defied logic. Then, suddenly, the creature stopped. It stood still in the middle of the road, watching them as they sped away into the fog. For a moment, the group thought they were safe, but then the car's engine sputtered. "No, no, no, not now," Zayn yelled, pounding the steering wheel as the car began to slow. The engine whined, coughed, and then died completely, leaving them stranded in the middle of the road. "What do we do now?" Ali asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Zayn replied, his mind racing. "We can't stay here." They sat in the car, listening to the oppressive silence of the forest around them. The fog pressed against the windows, thick and suffocating, and the twisted trees seemed to close in on them. Suddenly, Aisha let out a gasp. "Look!" The creature was back. It stood just outside the car, its glowing eyes fixed on them. But it wasn't alone this time. Behind it, more figures appeared, shadowy, twisted forms emerging from the fog. They surrounded the car, their glowing eyes watching, waiting. "What do they want?" Sarah whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Zayn's heart pounded in his chest as the figures closed in. There was no escape. The road, once endless, now felt like a trap, a nightmare they couldn't wake from. As the creatures pressed closer, their cold whispers filled the air. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, a language that none of them could understand, but its meaning was clear. They had been warned. They should have never taken the detour. Now there was no way out. The car's windows began to fog up from the inside, but not from the cold. Handprints appeared on the glass, and then faces distorted, grotesque, and barely human. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as the figures clawed at the car, their twisted limbs scraping against the metal. Zayn's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out, but there was none. The creatures were all around them now, their faces pressed against the windows, their glowing eyes watching, waiting for the moment to strike. And then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the figures vanished. The fog began to lift, and the road ahead was clear. Zayn quickly turned the key, and the engine roared to life. Without a word, they sped down the road, not daring to look back.